Good morning, Coral Springs. My name is Claudia, and I work for the City of Coral Springs as the Arbor and Horticulture Manager. A little bit of background about myself. I'm a master gardener. I have a bachelor's in biology and a master's in forest conservation. In the city, I'm responsible for the maintenance of all the landscape and public facilities, medians, cul-de-sacs, and all that. So our good friends from communications and marketing. So by the way, they are the ones who organize all the social events. They keep all the residents informed about what's going on in the city through Facebook and the websites. Came up with the idea of just bringing something different to you now that most of us are working from home. So we thought, what would be best than just giving you ideas to be outdoors in your gardens, just cleaning your minds and being away from the TV and the news that sometimes is just too overwhelming, and connecting with nature. So we're going to be giving you garden tips every week. And today we're going to start with the some concepts that you need to take into account when you're planning a planting project. If you have any questions, feel free to send them, and I'm going to try to answer them as they come. And if you have any ideas for future topics, feel free to send them too. Okay, so let's start with purpose. So you are probably seeing in your screen right now several pictures there. So the first thing that you need to think about when you're starting a planting project is, what do I want to achieve? What do I want to see here? Do I want to provide a shelter for wildlife? Do I want to attract butterflies? Do I want this to look like a tropical or a clean landscape? Do I want it to look formal? So all those are questions that you need to ask, because that way you're gonna get to a point that you can come up with the right species for that location. So the second thing that you need to think about is a concept that you're most likely familiar with, and it's called right plant for the right place. Sometimes it's called right tree for the right place, but it's pretty much just thinking about that location and the plant material. So when we're talking about locations, there are so many different aspects that can favor the success of the planting project that you have there. And pretty much is what it's gonna ultimately is what's gonna allow the plants to grow well. If I plant something in a very small location, it's going to overgrow the location and it's going to cause problems. In gardening, there's a lot of trial and error, but I'm pretty sure not everybody is willing to spend money or more money or spend a lot of time in your gardens just trying different things. Not a lot of people like that. So one of the things that it's important to consider when you're talking about right plant for the right place is the hardness zone. The U.S. Department of Agriculture came up with a map for the entire country, and you're going to see in the screen the map of Florida, and you can probably see different colors there through the different counties. You see that there's like a dark orange in the bottom for Miami-Dade County and part of the Keys, and then you have a light orange for parts of Broward and Palm Beach, and then you have other colors through the state. So what that means is that there are certain plants that are not going to grow as well in certain locations as they grow in their within their range, and that has to be with the lowest temperature that they withstand and survive. So if I bring something from the Keys, which is zone 11A, and I bring it to zone 10A or zone 10B, which has a different range of minimum temperatures, most likely that plant is not going to make it. There is a good example of this, and I see it often, and is the southern magnolia. According to the University of Florida, the southern magnolia is recommended only for hardiness zones 7A through 10A. However, I see it everywhere in Miami-Dade County, and Broward County. I'm not saying that all trees are going to die because of that, but they're going to struggle. So it's just different. And I know we like to push things through the limits, and sometimes some of the material does well, but it's just good to keep in mind that they're going to struggle because of that. They're not adapted to that. So if you need to know which hardiness zone Coral Springs is in, is 10B. So just keep that in mind. When you're buying plant material, sometimes you're going to find the hardiness zone in the tag, the plant tag, or you can Google it, or you can find it online. It's that information is readily available. It's very easy to find. Now we're going to talk about sunlight requirements. So we probably, all of you took biology when you were in school, and you remember that plants need to do photosynthesis to produce their food. And in order to go through that process, they need sunlight. So some plants tolerate shade, but by shade, we're not talking about complete shade. We're talking about maybe 3 to 4 hours of shade, and that's it. But they still need some light through the day. That's why you don't see a lot of plant material growing under trees that have a heavy canopy, because there's nothing that it's going to live there with so little light. So in this graph, we can see that we have material that performs very well under direct sunlight. There's some that prefer some partial filtered sunlight. And again, there are some that tolerate a little bit more shade, but keep in mind that they still need some kind of sunlight. So it's like a couple of hours a day. It's could be enough for some plant material. So always look for the sunlight requirements of the plant material you're picking. Another thing that goes with right plant, right place is soil conditions. In South Florida, we have, so you have two hands there. We have one with very dark soil, rich soil, and then we have one that looks more like clay on the left side. So our soils look like the left side. We don't have soils like on the right side, commonly. So those soils are sandy and rocky. They do not retain a lot of water. They do not retain a lot of nutrients. So we have to deal with those conditions when we're installing plant material. And that needs to be taken into account. We need to use material that it's adapted to those conditions. Something else that it's important to take into account is the pH of the soil. The pH that we have in South Florida is more alkaline than anything else. And I'm going to give you another example. So we use ixoras everywhere, very common plant material, a shrub. And ixoras like acidic soils, and our soils are alkaline. So you're always going to look at them and see them that they look yellow, and they have a lot of nutritional deficiencies. Because of that, you're going to see like all the veins and all that. So you have to amend the soil often to make them look good. And that is not a sustainable practice. So keep that in mind. Soil is very important. Now, we're going to talk about maturity at, size at maturity. So just compare the plant with like a puppy. When we get a puppy, it's so cute, so little, and we think that puppy's never going to grow big. And then within a year or two, that puppy becomes a huge animal. That happened to me. We got a puppy last year, and she fit in my lap, and now she is bigger than me. So it's the same thing with plants. They grow, they become adults. So keep that in mind. They're going to grow big. They can damage the structure if you plant them way too close. And something else is that you don't want to overcrowd your planting project. So when you're planting, of course, you want an instant gratification, but you also have to think about the future. How big is that plant going to get? So if I'm planting 10, I'm going to plant a bed, and I have 10 plants. I don't want to put them right next to each other because they're going to get big. And if I put them that close, the humidity is going to start to accumulate under and it's going to kill some of them. So if you go maybe like 2 to 3 feet apart, that would give you a good effect, instant effect, and it will allow the plant material to get bigger. Also, think about how close you're planting from a structure. You don't want to get too close because the roots can get under the foundation and cause problems. So go 3 to 4 feet up, from the foundation of the house. If you're not sure about how many plants you need to pick to complete a planting project, there are many plant calculators online. You just have to Google plant calculator. You just give the area that you want to plant, length and width if it's a square or the rectangular area, or if it's a circle, you just put the area there and it will give you automatically the number of plants that you need. The next thing that you need to think about is parts of the plant that could become a liability or could become an eyesore or something that is undesirable. So we see thorny plant material that you don't want to put next to a pathway or a sidewalk or anything where people are going to walk by, or areas where you need to go fix irrigation, areas where you need to walk. Something else that people don't think about often is that trees or shrubs that are flowering and their blooms fall in the ground or fall in a pathway, and they can become a liability for you because they make sidewalks slippery. So just think about that location. Where am I going to plant it? How big it's going to get? And if whatever that plant produces, it's going to cause a problem. Something else, black olives is like, I think they're great street trees, but they stain. So it's like not that they stain, but they have an animal that stains. So are you willing to deal with that, with staining driveways, or just think about what's going to happen in the future and what if you're willing to deal with it. So after you think about all the location conditions, think about maintenance. Are you willing to spend some time taking care of that plant? Are you going to have a dedicated irrigation system? Remember that in Broward County, we can only irrigate twice. So if you have an irrigation system, do you have a clock? Or do you have a rain sensor? Or are you going to water with a hose? So keep that in mind. You don't want to pick something that needs a lot of water. How often do I need to trim it? How often do I need to weed? Weeding is very important. How often should I apply mulch to disallow weeds? Do I have to fertilize? How often do I have to fertilize? And just think about going out and scouting for pests and diseases. If you become familiar with the plant material that you're choosing and you know which is common in that plant, let's say you pick whatever. Okay, so it's gonna get whitefly. So when you go and scout for pests and you see the whitefly, you will know what to apply to it. And you won't necessarily kill beneficial insects. So it's like you're gonna find a lot of beneficial insects and people kill them because they think they're pests. So becoming familiar with what it's common for that plant species, it's very important. And even with fertilization, if the plant does not need to be fertilized, why would you fertilize it? Or if it needs to be fertilized once a year, why would you do it 3 times a year or 4 times a year? Over fertilizing is not a good practice. It's unsustainable. Something else, and especially when we're picking something that produces like those great flowers like the yellow tabebuya or the royal poinciana or the jacaranda or even the common bowl cypress, keep in mind that those trees lose their leaves and they drop their flowers and they're bare certain times of the year. So they're going to look like skeletons for some parts of the year. So keep that in mind. Not a lot of people like that look. So are you willing to deal with that, or do you prefer something that keeps their flowers and the leaves the entire year, evergreens? So when you go out and you go to a nursery, and most of you are probably familiar with this term if you have applied for a tree removal permit, and it's called quality of the plant material. The quality of the plant material, it's a document that was prepared by the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and it has different categories for plant material. So if you're asking for something for a fancy plant material, that is like the best. When you get a tree removal permit, they ask you for at least a Florida grade number 1 and a Florida grade number 1. And then I'm showing you just pictures here or images of what would be a fancy, a grade number 1, a grade number 2, and a coal. And this standards exist because we want to, of course, the Department of Agriculture wants to protect the consumers and do not want people to end up with poor quality material that it's going to become a problem eventually. So pretty much a Florida number 1 is a tree that looks very nice on the top and has a healthy root system. And if you see in that picture, that circular root there, if that is not corrected, it can become what you see on the right, a tree that it's unstable and it can fall. Okay, perfect. Let's go with landscape design, and I don't want to spend a lot of time here because this is sometimes it's just for a little bit more complex, but just quickly, just to say, there are design standards or elements on design that it's good to take into consideration. So I'm going to go with whatever we have on the left side, which is the elements of design. So we're talking about a focal point. So when you're designing something, you want something that pops out, like flowers or something of color that it's going to make people look at it. Then you want to go with a line, and that's when you use some like borders, when you use edging, or you use stones to accentuate the lines of your design. Then you have the texture, and that's when you have like pointy leaves, or you have thin leaves, or something that it's just different in texture. Then you got with form. We have very different forms in shrubs. We have round forms. We have other ones that look more like squared or more like crazy, like a little bit crazy. And then we have, we'll talk about this texture. And something important is grouping. And grouping is just shown in the other side, on the right side. That is important because for some designers, they want to use only odd numbers. And the odd numbers create that perception of a project that it's complete, but is not overcrowded. So just quick elements, and we can review this later on. We can have a whole session just to talk about elements of design if you're interested about this. And that's all I have. And I would like to show you now, not in a picture, but give you some ideas about books that you can get. So this is one that is very good, and it was prepared by the South Florida Water Management District, and it's called WaterWise. The reason it's so good, it's because it tells you specifically the hardiness zone of the plant, the watering needs, the light range, and the growth range, and if it's evergreen or not. So it's a very thin book, and I can get you information. I got this one through the University of Florida, IFAS, but I can get more information to see if this is available for anyone who likes this. There's another good book prepared by George Rogers. He is a professor at the college in Palm Beach, and it's called Landscape Plants for South Florida. There's a new edition of this book, very cheap book. Again, tons of information and pictures. So you can see pictures of everything, and then it gives you some letters here, and it tells you specifically if the plant likes good drainage or not, if it needs a lot of water and things like that. So my tip of the week is use natives. Why? Because natives are adapted to the conditions that we have here. So that means that we're going to have more sustainable and easy to manage gardens. Now, if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer. Oh, and something else, for those of you who who are very interested in gardening and landscape and all that, the University of Florida, IFAS Extension, offers a course that it's called Best Management Practices for Green Industries. It's a one-day training, or you can even ask for a DVD. I got a DVD long time ago, and you can look at, I don't know, review it yourself, and they take the test. And it's just very good because it gives you a lot of information about good practices in the landscape field. And if you're one of those who like to share your knowledge and you get a good score in your test, you can become a trainer. And they need lots of trainers at the extension. And those trainings are done to qualify or give certifications to fertilizers. So it's a good thing to do. So we don't have any questions. I just got a message from David Mello, and he said he's Team Bold Cypress. I am too. So it was great to talk to you guys. Thank you for joining us. And if you have any ideas, just let us know. And I'll see you next week. Thank you.